Welcome into episode 424 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Now, Bridget and Scott, they drove up. Most people had the privilege of watching the Bruins lose 4-1 to Montreal from the comforts of their own home, but not Bridget and Scott. They said, you know what? Let's drive 4.5, 5 hours north, get some poutine, which I hope was good, Bridget, in the broadcast or the media area. And Scott's in a dark hotel room, and I just feel like it's the perfect visual for how Bruins fans probably feel at this stage in the season.
Yeah, I don't have a ring light, so apologies for people who have to. Maybe it's a good thing though. People don't see me as clearly, so
yeah, they can't tell how hungover he is.
I'm not hungover. I had like 2 beers last night.
Oh, but how about Wednesday night? I was getting some videos from you guys at the bar, and Scott, you were putting them back.
No, this trip was much more mild than last year, which was good.
Brian.
I felt good the whole way through.
Here's my favorite one. It's him hitting me in the face with a beer.
Yeah. Did you guys do a beer tower last year?
Yeah.
That was a bad choice.
That was Scott's demise last year.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bridget and Scott, we have opening shifts to get to. Obviously, like I said, the Bruins lost.
Before we get to that, though, do get a shout out. We once again made a post-game trip to Grumpy's. Fans of the podcast, great people. Ram, the owner. So that's always a highlight of the trip.
Yeah.
Grumpy's. Sounds a lot like Boston Bruins fans this year.
Yeah.
Well, it was full of Bruins fans. It's kind of like a secret little Bruins fan spot. Hidden in Montreal, and it's got bluegrass music. It was great. We loved it there. But yeah, where do we want to start with our opening shifts, guys? Because I think,
I'll go first because mine covers the losing streak, which obviously continued Thursday night. It's just history for all the wrong reasons. So 10th straight loss, 4-1 to Montreal. Once again, a terrible second period where they get outshot 17-2. But yeah, 10 straight losses, tied for the second longest losing streak in Bruins franchise history. The only one longer was in their very first season as a team in 1924-25. They had an 11-game losing streak. It was, I think I mentioned this before, it was games 2 through 12 that they played as a franchise. They won their first game and then lost the next 11. That's the kind of history you're challenging from 100 years ago. Once again, had 25 or fewer shots. They finished with 19. So that's 12 straight games. They've had 25 or fewer shots. And it's, again, tied for the second longest streak by any team, not any Bruins team, by any team since the NHL started recording shots in 1959-60. The only one longer was the 1998-99 Vancouver Canucks, who went 15 games. So it's just it, and I think what was amazing about Thursday's game is just like how noticeable it is that you've now completely flipped places with Montreal. Like, it was buzzing. It was electric up here. And because obviously the Canadians are making a playoff push. They're in the final wildcard spot right now. And now it's you. Like, now it's the Bruins that are the reason this rivalry doesn't feel whole. Like, for years it was, the Bruins would be playing meaningful games now, but the Canadians wouldn't. And now just in the course of one season, it flipped. Because even earlier this year when they played, it seemed like the Bruins were ahead of the Canadians. So now they are very clearly not.
No, the atmosphere was great. It was definitely different than the last 2 years that I came up here because 2 years ago, it was the Bruins were completing their last win of a historic season where they won the most games in the regular season in NHL history. And then this one is a 10-game losing streak. And my opening shift has to do with some of the comments after the game about how to get out of it. And obviously that's something that people have been asking. I do feel a little bit bad for the players because it's kind of over and over and over again, but you have like at some point someone's going to do something to get you out of this. And what Elias Lindholm said was, we need a full 60-minute effort. I feel like I haven't seen that in forever. The last time we had a 60-minute effort was probably the last time we won, which was all the way back against the Florida Panthers. And those 2 games right after the trade deadline that they won, and then they started this losing streak. And then Zadorov said, when asked the same question, I think you, Scott, were like, where do you start, or something to that effect, on getting back on track? And he just said, I don't know. Which is, it's honest. Like he said, we've lost 10 games. There's a lot that's going wrong. So I don't know where to start. And that does feel accurate.
Yeah. The good news for the Bruins players is that, actually, let me rephrase that. The good news for Bruins fans and the Bruins players is that there's only 6 games remaining. So the answers that they're searching for will no longer be questioned, at least this season, right? And Scott, to your opening shift, it is funny because I'm still gonna, and you kind of alluded to it, but I'm still gonna hold the Canadians to blame for the lack of rivalry, because they've for 10 years have been at the bottom. Over 10 years, you would think the Canadians could have had a couple of good years sprinkled in there while the Bruins were good, but
Well, and the one they did have was the year that the Bruins and Canadians didn't play at all because the NHL realigned for COVID. And of course, like
right.
the Canadians won the surprise run to the Stanley Cup final, but like there was no rivalry that year. They didn't play each other.
Yeah, and yeah, that should be mentioned that didn't the Canadians make the Stanley Cup finals that year as like an 18 seed? Because like didn't they make the playoffs in those COVID sanctioned like qualifying round, or either way? Yeah, it was a actually no, that was the end of the 2019-2020 season. The following year with the Canadian division is what you're talking about. That's right. Yeah. But yeah, but also something else that kind of has limited their rivalry has just been a lack of games played between each other since COVID-19 happened, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I used to, but there was a stretch from late 2019 to like mid 2021 or something like that. It was almost like a 2-year stretch, calendar year stretch, where the Bruins and Canadians didn't play each other because of COVID shutting down the remainder of the 2019-2020 season. Then the Canadian NHL division realignments, and then the following year they finally played again. So there's been a lack of games. Last night in Montreal was the Bruins' first game in Montreal in over a calendar year. So little things like that certainly don't help. And also there's less division games in season now. Of course, you have the divisional playoff rounds that are supposed to create rivalries, but it's been Boston, Toronto, and Boston, Florida for much of this time. But in any event, hopefully, Scott.
I mean, which has, it has done what the NHL wants. Like, if we're being fair, like,
yeah,
Boston, Florida was never a rivalry. Now it is, because they kept getting put against each other.
For sure. Oh yeah, it's definitely helped create. I mean, the Bruins and the Maple Leafs were always original 6 rivals, I guess you could pin them as, but they were never really true rival, unless I'm mistaken. But maybe back in the 60s, I don't think so though. I mean, they were out in the other conference, right?
Yeah, Toronto was like in the Western Conference for a while.
Yeah. But as pertains to the Bruins-Canadians rivalry, that's taken a bit of a backseat. Hopefully, clearly the Canadians are on the rise. Hopefully this Bruins situation, we'll see what happens in the offseason, but hopefully they're quicker to bounce back than Montreal's been, and they can both be good together at the same time again. But right now, that's not the case. My opening shift is I want to touch on Fabian Lysell at some point throughout this podcast. I feel like his stint has been a little bit not talked about as much by us, but he hasn't been doing a whole lot, and that's probably why. And there's a lot of chatter among Bruins fans out there that he's a bust. And right now, Lysell has played 6 games with the Bruins, and he's yet to record a point. And I understand people's knee-jerk reactions, but there's also examples out there of players. I mean, he hasn't even played 10 games in the NHL yet. So patience is a virtue, and I'm not saying he's going to go on to be a top 6 point producer in Boston. All I'm saying is I just think it's a little too early to definitively say that Fabian Lysell is a complete bust.
Yeah, way too early.
I don't know about way too early, but I would say it's still a little too early.
6 games, Scott. Ty tweeted this out.
Well, I mean, like, taking the whole context of he was drafted 4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
like,
I thought you meant
we
his
can be
NHL.
No. I mean,
Well,
like, we can be forming opinions on where he is. Like, we're 4
Yes.
years into his development since getting drafted, and yeah, he's not making a whole lot of an impact in NHL games. It's tough, right? Because it's like no one else is doing anything right now, so can we really expect Fabian Lysell to be the one who does something? At the same time, like, you're getting an opportunity, so it is up to you to do something with it. He's, I think the Bruins have quite a few guys right now who are not making the most of their opportunities. He got hammered last night, like, on the receiving end of quite a few big hits. One was probably interference. That was the one that first Zadorov tried to respond to, and then ultimately Cole Koepke ended up dropping the gloves with Caden Gooley. But the others were clean, and it was just him. I will say one was taking a hit to make a play, which you like. Like, that's what you have to do. But a couple were just like him not being able to get himself out of a vulnerable position or putting himself in one in the first place, where he kind of opened himself up to those hits. And like we've seen that from Matt Poitras when he's been up here. Like that, there, to an extent, it's admirable to see, a young, undersized player take hits, but learning how to avoid those and not get hammered into the boards is crucial for those guys, because they won't hold up if it keeps happening. Like, those guys aren't playing an 82 game NHL season if you get hit like that. They're going to get hurt. So that is also part of it. Like, in addition to not, as Brian said, not having any points yet. There's been some games he's had chances, and then there's been long stretches where, quite frankly, he's like not really involved. Like, he's not really around the puck. He's not on it. And he's not helping to create chances.
Well, so to the hits thing, he's only, this is his first taste of the NHL this season. 6 games in, there's a learning curve, the same way that Matt Poitras had to learn. Like, and he's getting, all right, there are guys that are going out of their way because he's smaller and inexperienced, and you saw people going right for him. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that if that's what they want to do, they can do it as long as it's not a penalty, whatever. But you can tell that he gets a lot of attention, and people finish their checks on him. And my thoughts on him were that even when I think he was on the ice, like physically hit to the ice like 7 times. I think he spent good chunk of his shifts a little like sitting on the ice because he got knocked down. And a lot of times, though, he made the play he needed to make before that. Like, he got rid of the puck just in time. He made a pass. He kept it moving. I did feel bad because it's probably hard to get yourself into a game when what you're mostly doing is looking over your shoulder to see if there's somebody coming to get you every single time that you touch the puck. So he did end up with, I think, 1 shot. He had a few that missed the net as well. He got up every single time. He popped right back up every single time he got knocked down. And I don't know. I wasn't ready to say, give up on the Lysell experiment, because it's so early. They're on a bad team. He's it was a rough game. And when they didn't put him in against Washington, I think this is what they thought was going to happen to him against Washington, but other teams are still going to do it, and you got a taste of it against Montreal.
Yeah, well, and I think, to be fair, like Scott isn't saying, he's not one of the ones saying that it's a complete bust and that it's over, but you guys both speak a lot of truth. And what I would say is, I do think it's too early. I think it's too early because despite the fact that he's been drafted and he's been in the system for 4 years this June, is that accurate?
Mhm.
So he's been in the system a long time. I would say he's been he's been a pretty consistent point producer in Providence, but his details have been inconsistent. But as far as getting NHL opportunities, that sample is too small at the moment. With that said, I don't think that he has seized this opportunity. The little opportunity it's been to be consistent, I have sat here a lot this season and said, you won't know until you give him an opportunity. So my biggest frustration was let's give him an opportunity. Let's see what he can do. Well, he's not grabbing the opportunity and running with it, right? It's not just the lack of point production. I think there's been flashes where he's been good. He showcased his speed and he has been good on the walls at times, but he clearly is lacking assertiveness and confidence with the puck on his stick. I think he's deferring a lot. And I just simply put the stage to this point has still seemed a little too bright for him. The lights have seemed a little too bright for him. Now, do those lights start to fade and confidence starts to grow at games 15, games 20, 25? Yeah, I'm sure, maybe. And there's still 6 games to go this year. And you're playing Buffalo, you're playing Chicago, you're playing Pittsburgh, you're playing Carolina, and you're playing New Jersey twice. 3 of those games, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Chicago in particular, he should be able to showcase some speed and skill and some confidence. But if the season ends and he's got 0 points or 1 assist in 12 games played, while not jumping off the screen in other ways, well, he has himself to blame for that. And even though it's a small sample size, you do have to take advantage of the opportunities that you're given because they are not promised. Clearly, it's been 4 years in the making for him to get this opportunity, this small sample size. So I don't know what the offseason brings for him. If he's somebody who kind of fades out into the end of the season, doesn't produce any points, I'm not really sure what leverage he has from a contractual standpoint to request a trade from the team. Maybe his experiment in Boston is over. Maybe it's not. I just don't know. There's too many unknowns with this roster as it pertains to next season at the moment. But he definitely needs to do more in these next 6 games if he wants to really show himself well, because a couple of good shifts here and there over a 12-game sample size, if by season's end, it's not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, I don't know why he would request a trade. Like it again, like he wasn't even if they were gonna make a call up just based purely on merit, it wouldn't have been Lysell. Like he wasn't playing the best of the Providence forwards. He hasn't been lighting it up down there. Like that's the thing. It's like, yeah, okay, it's like solid AHL production, but 11 goals in 51 games, 0.67 points per game. Like Vinny Lettieri was over a point per game. Potter and Merkulov are right there, just under a point per game. Like Patrick Brown produced more than that. Oliver Wahlstrom gets sent down, and he's producing more than that. 7 goals in 13 games. Like, so it's not. So yeah, like it was okay production, but he wasn't lighting the world on fire. This wasn't well, of course the Bruins have to call him up because they can't keep him down there. He's so hot. No. Like they called him up because it was like, well, I guess we should probably give Lysell some games and see what it looks like. And so far it's looked quiet. So yeah, does that mean he's a bust and he's done and he should never get another chance? No, I'm not saying that, but it is clear that there's quite a bit of work to do. So
But
he's going to go back to Providence for the playoffs. I do think that's going to be important for him. I think the AHL playoffs will be important. He's got to step up in a situation where, that should be more conducive to him producing and playing a big role. But yeah, up here it's been quiet.
can I say this first before I finish a thought that I have on Lysell. Scott, your shirt looks like it's licking the microphone.
It is. Yeah.
I can't not see it. It's just like over here. It's a Rolling Stone shirt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, just put it away. Keep it to yourself over there.
Well, I think the alternative is that his shirt would be off of the episode. So, you know,
don't worry about what we're licking and don't licking. Just get back to Lysell.
God, it's distracting. So I will say, I want to.
What if I like kind of move back and forth? Does that?
And that makes it worse.
Does that make it creepier? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick you from this in a second here. I want to stick up for Lysell a little bit because he's under a microscope, obviously, with everybody wanting to see what he can do, and you know, there's not much else to even pay attention to with the team. So he's kind of the guy that everybody's looking at, and every time he steps on the ice, eyes are on him to just try to get a look. And I think that he had to his defense a little bit. It's not like he's had these egregious turnovers and you're going, oh my gosh, like he's hurting the team right now. And the rest of the team sometimes goes quiet too. I mean, that's just what's been going on during this losing streak and with the team that they currently have. So he, for the most part, has gotten the shots off, which is clearly what was told to him before coming up. Just have that shooting mentality, and there's been games that he's done that and got a lot of shots on net. And they just didn't spend a whole lot of time in the offensive zone, especially in the second period against Montreal. So what's he supposed to do there if as a team they can't get the puck out of their own end? And so obviously if he was older, if he was more experienced, maybe he could have helped a little bit better in that category, and that's what you want. But he hasn't necessarily had the easiest go of the call up because they are getting outshot so heavily because they're not spending a lot of time in the O-zone, and he's not getting a lot of power play time because Pasta stays out there for a good chunk of it, and he maybe gets 20 seconds at the end of each power play, and he's getting targeted. And I do feel like I'm not watching his game and going, oh no, this isn't going to work out. I'm watching his game and just wanting to see how he mentally gets through some of the adversity. And I know this from my broadcasting career. When you start out, you're not as good as what you're going to be. And when somebody just pulls the plug on it before you even get a chance to correct what people tell you, hey, work on this, it's incredibly frustrating. And I just want to see him work through it. That's really how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, like that. Yes, but you do have to see signs that he is working through it, and I personally
think I am seeing like he mentally seems to be like, just from talking to him before the game, you can tell that his mentality is different than when we talked to him in the preseason, Scott. Like he seems to be answering things differently, like after experience. And I don't know, I got the sense that this was like one of those first games that he really got that much physical attention and that many hits. And he seemed to just bounce back up and try to go about it. And just, I don't know. I didn't see him look disengaged. I didn't see him look like he was quitting. I just feel like mentally he is getting through it and trying to fight his way through what's not the easiest situation to be in with the team right now.
Yeah, so I will say, like, you're right that obviously this is a situation where, you know, no one's getting much done offensively outside of occasionally the top line, so that doesn't help him. I will say that I think there's times he's had a chance to make something happen offensively, and what I've noticed, like, particularly on the rush, is sometimes he just drifts wide, and it's like not even at full speed where he's trying to like take the defender wide. It's almost like he doesn't have a play and he doesn't really know what to do with it, and so he just kind of drifts and like then either flips it in or tries to throw it to the net from distance. And those end up being pretty harmless plays as it, if you're the other team. So I do think like that is one concrete example of where he does have to figure out how to make something more happen. Like I think Sacco has talked about him getting to the inside more. And that's like that's where I see that show up is sometimes off the rush, he's not really working the puck to the middle or trying to get to the middle. It's almost like he just kind of falls off because he's waiting for another option or he's waiting for an outlet and it's just not there. And sometimes it like just leads to, like I said, either just a long shot that's not going to do any damage, or he ends up pinned against the boards and there's a tie up, and then whoever wins the battle has possession.
I understand that he's not perfect, and that's nobody should have expected that when he had never played in the NHL. What I'm saying is, now that you've maybe identified some trends in his game that you think need to be improved, give him a chance to actually fix it and work on it, and point it out every time you see it so that it's ingrained in your head. Okay, well, now I'm not gonna go down the wall on this shift or what have you. You can't just tell someone what they're doing wrong and not give them a chance to try to fix it if you really are interested in his growth and development at this level.
Well, he's going to get that opportunity theoretically these next 6 games, and that's a start. I think ultimately we're all in agreement here where it's probably a little too soon to write him off, but he has some work to do, right? That's probably a fair way to put it. And in Providence in his career, and this is just quick math on the fly, so it could be inaccurate, but I believe he has 117 points in 161 games. So, there's, to Scott's point, he's not a point per game guy in the minors. And when I suggested earlier or mentioned earlier that maybe if he goes the rest of this season still not recording a point, that he might want to request a trade, it wouldn't be because he feels like he's so good that it would be because maybe a player could say to themselves, oh shit, I kind of effed up this opportunity and I don't know if I'm going to get another chance with this team because I didn't take advantage of it. And maybe that's why he could go to his agent. But again, I'm not saying he will or would, or that contractually he can. I just know that sometimes when a player feels like maybe they don't, whether it's their own doing or whatnot, or the teams, that maybe the fit just isn't there, the opportunities isn't there going forward. Because I don't know if he goes the rest of this season, Bridget, you're kind of talking about them giving him opportunity beyond these next 6 games, right? You mean even going into next year? So,
I mean, with the roster they have, obviously it's going to change in the offseason.
Well, that's the thing, yeah.
Be a spot for him for the first time. And by the way, like, we're talking about him not having NHL experience. And one of the reasons is because they just really haven't had space on the NHL roster for him. And now it feels like they do. So he probably, I guess I can't really project too far out. I'm not even going to say we'll probably start there because that's too far ahead of us. And we know that he hasn't been given those opportunities out of camp in the past. So
right now, there's ample opportunity.
I mean, he had the opportunity this year. That spot was wide open, and he didn't do enough to win it.
But right now, there's ample opportunity on a tough roster, a tough looking roster on paper and on the ice. But you have to imagine that the Bruins are going to try to go out there and they're going to try to improve this roster to the best of their ability, whether that's hockey trades, free agency, undrafted sign. Like, we don't know what the roster competition is next year at this point, right? So that's why for him, you have to try to grab this opportunity now. I would say through the first 6 games, I would say he's done some good, but he hasn't done enough to tell the coaching staff we can't send him back down to Providence, right? So, yeah, I think too early to tell on him still, but he still has some work to do. So there's other storylines throughout this game and post-game. I'll throw it to you guys on where you want to go next. I can go a few different directions here. We can go into the Zadorov and Lindholm's comments. I think Mason Lohrei and his further development going forward is worth discussing. Defensively, we all know what he can do offensively. I think he's been obviously overexposed due to no Lindholm, no McAvoy. Same with Zadorov. So when he's in the right fit, does he get exposed as much? Probably not, but it still has showed us that he has X work to do defensively. We can go there. We can go anywhere you guys want to go.
Let's do Lindholm and Zadorov post game. Yeah, I liked Lindholm's answers. Saying like when I asked him, like how it hasn't been hard to still basically show up every day with the right attitude and work ethic that you need. And he said, well, this is our job. We get paid a lot of money to do this. So that shouldn't be an issue. Like, he's right. That doesn't mean that it doesn't become an issue sometimes. Zadorov. Yeah, I think you get honesty from Zadorov. Sometimes it's not maybe we saw with the Swayman thing, obviously, and then I would say to a lesser extent last night, but it's not the PR trained answers, which I like. Obviously, us in the media, like, we appreciate that. I do wonder if it's, again, like, if he's trying to emerge as a leader of this team, does that work? Like, how does that go over in the room, but also with the organization? Like, is it because sometimes, like, just being honest that can be a good thing. Like, sometimes people need to hear that. Other times it's like, there might be like, hey, Nikita, like, can you rein it in a little? Like, your post-game comments kind of become the story quite often, and that's not really what we're looking for. So I do wonder, like, how they kind of feel about that over there. But yeah, like last night, obviously, was nothing egregious, but when I asked him, where does it start to try to turn this around, and he just says, I don't know, and like that's the end of the interview. And again, like, I think that's the honest answer. I think he legitimately doesn't know, but it also doesn't really come across the best because I think that, like, I saw it on social media, like, there's some fans who sort of, it was like, well, then, like, why is he here, or like, what is he doing? Like, he doesn't know how to, like, where to even start, because the cliche answer would be more along the lines of what Lindholm said, which is like,
60 minutes.
like, you show up, you work hard, you give it 60 minutes. Like,
Which, by the way,
that's the cliche.
I tried to post that clip and I thought I did, and it's just not on it's just not on my Twitter. So maybe I'll try to post that part of it to that. Sometimes my phone just doesn't work, and apparently that one didn't post, but it was that answer that he had about not having a full 60-minute effort in a long time. And yeah, I mean, that is the right answer. And and Zadorov had spoke earlier in that same conversation about not getting hemmed in, and was like listing other things that they weren't doing well. But to be fair, what the question was where does it start? And I mean, it has to start with pretty much everything. So that's not one thing you can just point out. So I mean, he kind of,
again, like, the easy cliche PR trained answer is, well, they're not practicing Friday, so it starts at Saturday morning skate. We show up and we skate hard and we work. Like, that's the cliche answer.
Yeah. And he didn't give it, and he has not had that hasn't been his track record, which he's honest. Lindholm was honest. Those when I saw the dialogue on Twitter about those answers was actually more positive than the reaction to Swayman in his comments, because him and Zadorov always have pretty much completely different philosophies on or mindsets on after the game, where they are mentally. And Swayman's always in the, oh, we're gonna figure it out. And so I'll read you his quote. He said, on the losing streak. He said, you create your own luck, but absolutely we've gotten a little bit of tough puck luck. But I think that we just have to stay in the moment, and it's extremely difficult to do that. It's easy to say, but that's what makes diamonds out of all of us.
Yeah, and I will say, because I think people have latched onto the puck luck thing. I will say, like, in his defense, that was included in the question.
It was.
I forget who asked that question, but like they mentioned like possibility of needing better puck luck. So
Yes.
it wasn't like Swayman just out of the blue brought up like, oh, we've had some bad puck luck.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's on, like I said, I tweeted it. You could the question is in there as well, so you can hear it for yourself if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the comments from Elias Lindholm I appreciated, right? I think that the self-awareness in that moment I thought was a great answer. These guys are getting paid millions of dollars to play a game, and they're fortunate. You know, they've worked hard to get to this point in their profession, but to have that perspective is good, because it's very easy as fans to sit here and say, these guys got to trot out there for 6 more games, but their checks are clearing, right? This is their job. So obviously when things are going well, they say, you know, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. I think for the most part, these guys go to the rink and they don't feel like it's a job. But there are some circumstances where maybe in a stretch like this, for a team like this, you do latch on to, well, it's our job, you know, so we're gonna show up to work because there's no excuses. And that's what these guys are gonna do the rest of the way. Right now, the Bruins points percentage wise, in points wise, I believe would have the 4th spot in the draft pre-lottery. It doesn't appear that they will be catching Nashville at 3. There's just a little too much separation and not enough time. But behind the Bruins, you know, they could slide back down to 5 or 6 organically, but it's looking like 4 or 5 is probably where the Bruins will land. And we've talked a lot about draft positioning. We'll talk a lot more about it as we get closer to those days and the ping pong balls and everything. But I have a question for you guys. We only have 10 minutes left. I know I kind of teased the Mason Lohrei thing. We can save that for another day. I think we haven't really talked a lot about Mason Lohrei. I think offensively, like I said, we know what he can do. He's been, you know, showcasing his talents and his skills. But still, when you're a defenseman, defensively, you have to be at least at a certain threshold, and I think he still has to get there. And we can talk about that. I don't mean to tease that too much, but I wanted to ask you guys a question, because when I watch these last games, an exercise I find myself doing is, we kind of talked about it a little bit with Lysell, but we can talk about it with Middlestat, who has no trade protection right now. Obviously, Kuzigang's not going anywhere, but I try to look at players on the ice and looking at their contractual status, and I really try to figure out which players I think the Bruins might be moving on from after these 6 games and which players they'll be hanging on to. And I'm just curious if you guys have started that exercise in your mind, if any players have popped out to you where you're like, you know what, I thought maybe once upon a time they might offer them a contract as an RFA, but maybe now they're not. Like Parker Wotherspoon, his stock has kind of gone down to me. Like, and I know in a season like this, everybody's stock is probably going down, right? But Johnny Beecher, Cole Koepke, you know, just all these kind of like players that they could do with or without. Where do you guys sit with them? And I bring up Casey Middlestat because I think clearly you probably try to keep a player with his upside in his youth. He had a really bad turnover against the Canadiens, but he has no trade protection at the moment. So I don't know how bold or creative the Bruins are going to get in the offseason, but in these final games, how have you guys been assessing some of these players, if they should be part of the problem, part of the solution going forward? I'm sorry.
Yeah, some of them might be part of the problem going forward, but that's, yeah, you hope not. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it feels like you can turn over an awful hell of a lot of this roster. I mean, really, like outside of the outside of your top line, and then obviously the injured guys, McAvoy and Lindholm, like they're staying. Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, you can't do anything with, even if you wanted to, because of their no movement clauses.
Well, you could, but they'd have to approve it, right? Which is just
Yeah.
like barking up a
Well,
really
and
tough tree in the first year, second year of their contract.
yeah, and you'd have to find a taker. Like
Yeah.
you're ideally, you're not eating money for the next 4 years on Zadorov or 6 years on Lindholm. So someone have to take, like, no one's taking Elias Lindholm's contract. Like that's just not happening. So he's not going anywhere. Everyone else, it's like obviously Lori, yes, you want to extend. Yeah, everyone else, it's like I don't know. Do they need to be back? Like, no, that's what's kind of so depressing about this losing streak and this stretch run now is like there just aren't really many guys who are forcing the Bruins' hands and or like raising their hand to be like, I'm part of the future, I'm part of the solution. You need to keep me around. Like I think there's guys who show some flashes. You know, I think Middlestad did some good things early on. Certainly Husnudinov. You know, you still see occasional good shifts from, but he's really quieted down. I don't know. The entire bottom of the roster can go. Like you don't need to bring back Parker Weatherspoon. I mean, Yoki Haru, like maybe on a discount if you just need to fill a roster spot on your blue line. You know, Koepke does some good things, but like I don't know that you need to re-sign him. Um, you know, Jacob Lauko, like you keep him around just for vibes. I think we know pretty clearly by now there's not going to be much offense there. You know, Husnudinov I'm keeping around just because he's so young. Beecher as an RFA, like, would it surprise anyone if the Bruins don't issue him a qualifying offer and just let him go? Like, what, again, like, what is Johnny Beecher doing right now to raise his hand and show management, like, I'm part of the future. Like, I'm part of the solution next year.
He did almost score on a breakaway. That would have been the first time he scored in a long time, though.
He
And
almost scored, the Johnny Beecher story.
very close. Very close. But yeah, and to not go on this topic for too long, I think when Don Sweeney moved on from Coyle, Carlo, and Marchand is not part of their future, that tells you that the ball, and obviously he moved on from those guys for the right return, but he'd already decided those guys aren't part of the future for next season. Then some of these other guys don't have a great case because they weren't doing as well as those guys were. And I'll just leave it at that. But I think the one person that has is Morgan Geekie. He's the one who has survived the trade deadline, which we didn't know if he would, made a case for himself to get the next contract. He's an RFA, and I feel like he'll be back. So that's the one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, all the guys that Scott mentioned, I'm not bringing back, right? Like all those fringe guys that are expendable, like I'm not bringing them back. Maybe Yoki Haru on a discount, like Scott said, just because you got to fill out that blue line. But the best case that these players, these fringe players that haven't shown anything, would have to come back is it's tough to replace an entire roster at an offseason, right? Like that, like from a numbers perspective, that's the only thing they have going for them. But honestly, on the back end, you have McAvoy and Lindholm coming back. So that's 2. So you got McAvoy, Lindholm, Zadorov, and Lori. That's 4, right? What's Peake's contract status?
He has 1 more year.
So you got Peake, that's 5, and then maybe a Yoki Haru or somebody like that. Maybe somebody like, yeah, that. So there you go right there. The blue line is already kind of, you know, for the most part there. And then up front, like you have to imagine that somebody like a kid like Fraser Minton, who has 20 games to his name in the NHL around there, like he'll probably push for, you know, a third line spot. Poitras comes back maybe like that. So you start, and you know, Kaslik is hurt, but he's in that 4th line. So yeah, I mean, Wotherspoon, Beecher, Koepke, all these guys that just haven't done much of anything pre or post deadline. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Like to start the year, that fourth line was very good. In fact, they were the only thing going. But you got to do it a little bit longer, unfortunately, for them.
Yeah, and Casey Middlestat is such a fascinating, or just a really interesting piece here, because again, he is on a real contract. Like 2 more years after this, $5.75 million a year. Look, he struggled in Colorado, and now he's gone pretty quiet here after a pretty encouraging start the first few games when he came over. But like that, again, unless you're gonna find a taker in a trade, like that's someone who needs to be like a pretty critical part of your middle six and produce. Otherwise, like if he's gonna go quiet and you already have Elias Lindholm quiet, it's like, wow, that's 2 centers who are making, trying to do quick math, over $13 million combined, that like they can't both be quiet. They can't both not bring offense. That's like, that just, if they're there next year and not producing, like there goes next season. Seriously, like you can't have $13 million tied up in centers who aren't producing. So you need one or both of those guys to really pick it up.
Yeah, and one thing I've thought about too is, again, it depends where the ping pong balls fall, but one ace the Bruins could have up their sleeve is, let's just say they stay where they are at 4 after the ping pong balls. Is there a young player on the roster that has enough age and skill and promise, and maybe Boston packages that player with 4 to move up to 2? Like, and maybe a team would be okay going down a spot, or I think there's things the Bruins could try. Like hypothetically in this situation, like if you're would Middlestat and 4 get you 2, right? That just because his name's on top of my mind. I don't know, maybe not, probably not. But if you're the Bruins,
probably not, because unfortunately Middlestat's not playing well enough for there to be any value in that contract for a team to take on right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. I'm very fascinated to see where this off season goes, and yeah, it's a tough spot, because you say there goes next season, Scott, and potentially, right, if those guys don't produce. The problem is, guys, this season with the Bruins, they've been so bad, right? I look at the standings. How on God's green earth is San Jose still like 20 points back of Boston? Now, I know the Bruins obviously were a different team pre-deadline than they were now, but that's how bad you have to be for that long to sniff 32. And the ping pong balls could still screw you. So, like, the whole tank from Gavin McKenna, it's just like no team in the NHL right now is going into next year. Like Chicago, San Jose, those teams, they're going to try to improve. They don't, as good as McKenna is, they're not going to want to be 32 next year. It's going to have to be somebody who organically ends up at 32. Will it be Boston? I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of unknowns right now for this team. Good news is we have plenty of time over the summer and beyond to break it all down. But right now, it's kind of a tough spot. There's 6 games left. The roster we're even watching right now isn't going to be the roster next year. Their, sole focus is right now draft positioning, truly. So, but you guys have you have to check out from your hotel,
yes,
I think.
do.
So,
can I quickly get in one thing that I wanted to talk about? We will have more time in the off season, or maybe even next episode when we don't have to check out of a hotel, and can spend more time talking about it. Just some of the college transactions the Bruins made after certain guys' seasons ended. Still 4 teams left. BU is the only team from around here that's still in it. So
Go Terriers.
So you're welcome, Scott, for saying that. But so they did sign Don Zleshmelis from UMass, and he immediately went to playing in Providence. So he's already there. Albin Boya was reported this week to be leaning towards staying at Maine, but he's going to attend Bruins development camp, and he's a very good goaltender. Had a great season, won Hockey East, the Hockey East tournament MVP. And then Ty Gallagher, who used to be at BU, played his last year at Colorado College, is in Providence, signed with Providence. And then the Bruins signed Dalton Bancroft from Cornell, who's kind of like a big physical winger. they were targeting him after. There was a few teams targeting him, but the Bruins were able to sign him as a free agent.
Yeah, and Bancroft was at Bruins development camp last year, so obviously they already have some firsthand knowledge of him. I think they liked how he looked in camp over the summer, and then had a pretty good season: 15 goals, 12 assists in 36 games. Played on the line with another Bruins prospect, Ryan Walsh, was Cornell's center on that top line. So yeah, obviously a player that they've seen a lot, and that there was some interest. Like, is he ever going to be an NHLer? I don't know, but that's one thing I will push back on here is the people who see these signings and are like, he's not going to help them in the NHL. And it's like, you have like a whole organization to fill out, right? Like, yeah, not every signing is made with the expectation that this guy's going to score 20 goals in the NHL. Like, sometimes you just have to sign good players for Providence, and maybe they become something. It's not like there was no star in this college free agent class. So yeah, you're just looking for organizational depth, but that is also part of running an organization. So
Yeah,
like,
it
don't freak out about like what Dalton Bancroft might or might not be in the NHL ever. Like, it's fine. He's a good player. He's going to help Providence. Sometimes that's okay.
Yeah, you're taking swings, and there's not, if he's an AHLer, then he's an AHLer, but you're taking a swing at a guy that you like his character or you like his physicality, and yeah, some players. I mean, if you go watch a Providence Bruins game, there's some guys on that team that have been there for a long time. They're well liked by the fans who go see Providence all the time, and that there's different pieces that fit in there. So anyway, I just wanted to put those out there because we've been talking prospects, we've been talking what's next, and some of those guys were names that maybe people had heard of, maybe they hadn't, and just wanted to update what the Bruins have, because now some of these guys are joining Providence, right around their time of the playoffs, so maybe we'll get a chance to see them then.
Yeah, I think this is what they categorize as low risk, high reward type moves when you bring in these NCAA undrafted individuals, oftentimes undrafted. And honestly, like, it's great if you're a 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old prospect that is just lighting it up and you just have all the skill in the world and you're in Canadian juniors or wherever, and you get drafted. A lot of times players, when it comes to their draft year, they just, they develop later. They polish their game off with a little bit of age and experience and strength. And sometimes you get teams draft, or sometimes teams sign undrafted NCAA players and they turn into big time players for them. I mean, and they're few and far between, but I mean, Torrey Krug was undrafted for the Bruins, right? I don't know if people thought much of his signing out of Michigan State back in 2012 or whatever, but you just never know, right? So there's not a ton of risk, and when there's not a lot of risk, it's tough to get upset over. I don't know why people get so upset over these signings or so judgmental. I mean, it works out great. If not, who cares?
Twitter,
Whatever.
that's why it's Twitter, and people complain about literally everything. So that's your answer.
All right. Well, you two enjoy a 4-hour podcast in the car on the way home, and drive safe. Thank you all very much for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.